Good day, guys. Welcome to this lecture. We'll be covering step 5 of IFRS 15, revenue from contracts with customers. Step 5 deals with satisfaction of performance obligation. In this step, we'll be recognizing revenue. Then, what you need to know is that an entity recognizes revenue when or as the entity satisfies a performance obligation. It means that the entity must have transferred the promised goods or services to a customer. Transferring the promised goods or services to the customer will lead to the customer obtaining control of an asset or goods or services. And then control refers to the ability to direct the use or obtain substantial all the remaining benefits from the asset. Control might also include the ability to prevent others from using the asset or obtaining benefits from the asset. Therefore, is the customer using the asset, or are they able to obtain substantial the benefits relating to the asset? And can they also prevent others from using the asset? Then, if that's the case, it means that control has passed. Then, the company has satisfied its performance obligation. Then, at the inception, we need to determine whether control or the performance obligation will be satisfied over time or at the point in time. Then, if we say performance obligations are satisfied over time, we are talking about one of the 3 criteria. It means that the customer simultaneously receives and consumes the benefits provided by the entity's performance as the entity performs. As the company performs, the customer is benefiting from our performance. Number B, the entity's performance creates and enhances an asset that the customer controls, or as it created or enhanced. It means that we are working on the asset which the customer owns or controls. We are enhancing a customer's asset. And then the third one, the entity's performance does not create an asset with an alternative use, or the entity has an enforceable right to payment for the performance completed to date. It means that we have completed the asset, then no other entity or no other use that asset can be used for, and then we have a right to a payment as the performing entity. Then, any of the 3, if they are met simultaneously as we perform, the benefits are consumed by the customer. That's number A. Or if the entity performs or creates or enhances an asset which is under the control of a customer. The last one, the performance which has been conducted by the entity is on an asset which doesn't have an alternative use, and then we have a right to payment. However, if these 3 are not met, it means that we have to test whether the performance obligation are satisfied at a point in time. At a point in time has these following examples. An entity has a right to a payment for the asset. Are we having a right for a payment? That's number 1. Or else, the customer has a legal title to the asset. Have we given the customer the title of the asset? That's number 2. Number 3, the entity has transferred physical possession of an asset. Have we transferred the physical possession of an asset to the customer? Number 4, the customer has the significant risks and rewards of ownership of the asset. Then, the risks relating to ownership of an asset are with the customer. Then that's a point in time. And then the last one, we can also test the customer has accepted the asset. He has accepted that the asset belongs to them. They might have signed the contract or delivery note then we have satisfied our performance obligation at a point in time. If we have to test this further in terms of the benefits, to check whether the benefits of an asset are with the customer. Is the customer using the asset to produce goods or to provide services? Then the customer is benefiting from that good. The second one is the customer using the asset to enhance the value of other assets. If that's the case, then the benefits have been transferred. The third one is the customer using the asset to settle liability or reduce expenses. Also, the customer will be having the benefits of the asset. Can the customer sell or exchange the asset? If that's the case, it means that the customer is having control and having benefits of the asset. Can the customer pledge the asset to secure a loan or holding the asset? Then there are benefits for having the asset for the customer. And then the next point, the methods we can use to measure the performance can be based on output methods or input methods. What is the entity which is delivering the service or providing the goods? Inputs or in terms of outputs? The last thing which you also need to consider, if an entity is not able to reasonably measure the outcome of the performance obligation, it shall recognize revenue only to the extent of the costs incurred until it is able to measure the outcomes of the performance obligation. Then, we can talk now about presentation. How do we present the revenue or the liability which we need to recognize? We might have earned the revenue, but we haven't received the money, which means that if we have earned the revenue, we have a receivable. We are entitled to the money. It's a receivable. If we are not entitled, there's still a condition which needs to be met. Then, the money we haven't received, it means that we have a contract asset. In terms of contract liability, we haven't paid, we received the money, but we haven't delivered. Where are we going to report? In terms of presentation, when one party to the contract has performed, we have received money, or we have delivered goods, an entity shall present the contract in the statement of financial position as a contract asset or a contract liability. We have received money, but we haven't performed. However, an entity shall present an unconditional rights to consideration separately as a receivable. Now, it will not be a contract asset if there is unconditional right for us to get the money. We have a receivable. To follow this short presentation or disclosure discussion, these are the key definitions which you need to know. A definition for contract liability. A contract liability is an entity's obligation to transfer goods or services to a customer for which the entity has received consideration. We have received money from the customer. Then, we haven't delivered. We need to recognize a contract liability. We'll assume you debit bank and you credit your contract liability. The second definition is about contract asset. A contract asset is an entity's right to consideration in exchange for goods or services that the entity has transferred to a customer when the right is conditioned on something other than the passage of time. For example, the entity's future performance. We have delivered up to a certain point. Maybe there's still an inspection or valuation of our performance. Before the performance has been evaluated or the inspection took place, we'll recognize a contract asset. It will not be a receivable. One party has performed, We have performed, but the client hasn't paid us the money. We are waiting for an inspection. Okay, thank you for watching. See you next time.